What if history isn't as quiet as we think? Around the world, certain places hold dark secrets, with hauntings that stretch across time. Tonight, I'm diving into two terrifying international hauntings, from their origins to how they're still scaring us even today. These tales blur the lines between folklore and something far darker. Could they just be legends? Or is there truth hiding in the shadows? Decide for yourself. And if you've ever visited a place that made your skin crawl or have your own story to share, drop it in the comments. Who knows? The scariest hauntings might be closer than you think. Aokigahara has a reputation for being one of the most haunted places in Japan. This dense forest at the base of Mount Fuji has long been associated with yurei, or spirits of the dead. Known as the Sea of Trees, Aokigahara is infamous for its connections with those who unalive in the eerie quietness, as the dense forest blocks out sounds. Legends speak of these yurei, drawn in by the despair of those who end their lives there, now becoming vengeful and trapped within the forest. Ever wandering, they lure the lost further into the woods. Visitors report hearing whispers, screams, and seeing shadowy figures that just vanish into the trees. In 2023, Yuki, a popular YouTuber chasing clicks, decided to spend the night in Aokigahara with a live streaming setup. As the stream begins, Yuki's audience sees her navigate through the forest at dusk. She's making jokes, but it's obvious she's getting more and more jumpy as the stream wears on. Discussing the history of the forest, she also brings up death and dying, and her own experiences with losing people in her life. The video feels more Blair Witch Project than any of her regular streams, as the number of watchers skyrockets. But around midnight, viewers notice blurry figures moving behind her. But Yuki doesn't seem to see them. As her comment section erupts in panic, the screen glitches, freezing in place. Seconds later, the stream shows Yuki standing in a clearing surrounded by misty shapes. She looks directly into the camera, her expression blank, and whispers, "They want you to see." The stream cuts out again, and that's the last time Yuki is seen. She and her equipment were never found, and she remains a missing person to this day. That wasn't the only time the spirits of the Aokigahara forest claimed the living. Earlier this year, a group of 3 investigative explorers live-streamed their visit to Aokigahara at night to challenge the haunted forest rumors. They even discussed Yuki and what could have happened to her. As they moved deeper into the woods, their GPS begins malfunctioning, becoming basically useless. At times, their feed became staticky and interrupted. One by one, the explorers claimed to hear whispers calling their own names, and you can feel their desperation as they get separated from one another. The last scene of their broadcast shows the camera tumbling to the forest floor, capturing a fleeting, pale figure moving towards the area where the camera lay. Despite the direction of its movement, the being seems to stay clouded, more mist than anything else. Days later, their equipment is found, but there was no trace of the group. What do you think happened? With Yuki, it's tempting to believe she contrived the whole thing as a way to record her own disappearance and boost her popularity. But a year is a long time to go missing for clicks. One theory is that she unalived herself there, but her body should have been found. As far as the missing investigators are concerned, the rumors about them are wild. Of course, there's the theory that they're boosting their channel's popularity too, but why hide for all these many months? Another theory was that they were taken by the government over a previous controversial investigation into corruption. Of course, the alternative is that whatever haunts the forest, these yurei are actively preying on the living. This impressive Loire Valley castle has a dark past. Charlotte de Brissac was a woman of refined tastes, accustomed to the splendor and sophistication of courtly life of 15th century France. Her marriage to Jacques de Brissac caused her to move to the remote and drafty Château de Brissac, nestled deep in the French countryside. But it was a stark contrast to the glittering halls she once called home. To make matters worse, her husband Jacques was a coarse and inattentive man, more at ease with hunting in the woods and managing his estates than with indulging in the cultured pursuits that Charlotte adored. Isolated and unhappy, Charlotte soon found solace in the company of Pierre de la Varne, a handsome and charming huntsman in Jacques' entourage. Pierre showered her with affection and attention. It was what she so desperately craved, and before long their secret meetings ignited into a full-blown love affair. One fateful night, her husband Jacques returned to the chateau and discovered his wife in bed with her lover. Consumed by a violent rage, he murdered them both. But the details of their deaths remain shrouded in mystery. Some say Jacques delivered 100 savage blows to each of them with his hunting axe. Others whisper that Pierre was struck down instantly, while Charlotte was strangled in a cold, prolonged act of vengeance. Their bodies were never recovered, adding a grim layer of speculation to an already tragic tale. But Jacques' torment didn't end there. Not long after the murders, he abandoned the chateau, supposedly unable to endure the haunting cries that echoed through its walls. Locals claim these horrifying wails belonged to Charlotte, whose spirit refused to rest. Over the centuries, Charlotte's ghost, now known as the Green Lady, has become an infamous presence in the Château de Brissac. She is most often seen drifting through the castle in a flowing green gown, her once beautiful face now a ghastly sight, with hollow, gaping holes where her eyes once were. Visitors to the chateau have reported hearing her high-pitched, mournful wails echoing through the castle, lamenting her tragic love and cursing the husband who ended it all. While the spirit of Pierre seems to have long since moved on, Charlotte remains tethered to the chateau, her restless ghost trapped in the tower of the castle chapel. Until her spirit finds vengeance or peace, the Green Lady seems doomed to haunt Château de Brissac. In 1987, Dr. Clara Winslow, an esteemed American art historian, traveled to France to study the celebrated tapestries of the Château de Brissac. Her study was intended to focus purely on art for a book she was writing, but it would become a chilling chapter in her own history. One afternoon, Clara was focused on flipping through photographs she'd taken that day, when a peculiar detail caught her eye. In several images, a woman in a flowing green dress appeared faintly in the background. At first, she thought it was a staff reenactor, wandering the chateau for the tourists. But the more photos she checked, the stranger it got. The woman in green was in all her photos, always in the background, always looking away. Clara, being curious and brave, or honestly reckless, grabbed her flashlight and started searching for this woman in green. Clara said it was getting late and the sun had already set. The chateau, especially at night, is like a maze, quiet, dark, and creepy as hell. She went from room to room but found herself alone. No reenactors, no staff, nothing, just silence and shadows. Then she reached one of the long hallways, lined on one side with tall mirrors like you'd expect in a fairy tale castle. But instead of being magical, it became terrifying. At the far end of the hall, Clara saw her, reflected in the last mirror, the green lady. She was wearing the long green dress from her photos, unmistakable even in the shadows. Clara tried to call out to her, to ask who she was and what she was doing there. That's when the ghost turned to her. And this is where it got bad for Clara. The woman's face was destroyed. There were gaping holes where her eyes should have been, and her expression was twisted with anger and sorrow. Clara remembered freezing in place, too stunned to move or scream. And then the green lady did something no one would want to hear in a situation like that. She let out an ear-splitting, blood-curdling scream. Clara described it as cutting through her soul. She said she remembered turning and running, and then nothing but darkness. Clara was found in the driveway of the chateau by one of the staff, half frozen, barely able to speak, and completely shaken, unable to remember anything beyond the green lady. Her notebook, camera, and photos were all scattered all around her, like someone or something had thrown them. Whatever she saw in the hallway wasn't just her imagination. The staff calmly explained to her that she'd encountered the green lady's ghost. The experience left Clara forever changed, deeply scarred, and she suffered from nightmares and severe PTSD for years afterward. Determined to make sense of what happened, Clara delved into the history of the chateau, publishing several academic papers and books on its hauntings and the legend of Charlotte de Brissac. Her accounts, though often met with skepticism, have drawn countless paranormal enthusiasts to the Château de Brissac. To this day, Clara maintains that what she saw was no mere figment of her imagination. In interviews, she's spoken of the inexplicable fear she felt and the overwhelming sense of sorrow radiating from that ghostly woman. So, was Clara's experience real? Or was her green lady story an opportunity to make a name for herself? I tend to lean into the idea that this was a real experience, since others have also claimed to have seen her. What do you think? Just 7 years later, another chilling account from the chateau emerged. The Dupont-Garnier wedding in June of 1994 was a celebration that started with joy, but ended in terror. The wedding party had rented the chateau for an opulent weekend wedding. The couple were drawn to the venue's historic beauty and imagined a fairy tale celebration. What they didn't know, or maybe chose to ignore, was the chateau's dark reputation tied to the notorious Green Lady ghost. On the first night, as the rehearsal dinner wound down, a bridesmaid named Sophie claimed she saw someone, a stranger, on the upper balcony overlooking the courtyard. The woman was wearing a flowing green dress, standing silently watching the guests below. Although she didn't recognize the woman, she assumed she was a staff member and brushed it off. The next morning, the bride discovered her bouquet, made from lilies and roses, completely shredded. It wasn't an accident. The flowers were torn apart with a force that suggested rage. No one could explain what happened or how it happened, and the staff swore they had no access to that locked room where the bouquet had been stored. Later that day, during the wedding dinner, the atmosphere shifted again when the bride and groom toasted their guests. It followed with an ear-piercing sound of hundreds of glasses breaking in the back rooms of the kitchen, echoing through the dining hall. The staff whispered about the chateau's infamous ghost as they cleaned the mountain of shattered glass on the floor. The couple tried to reassure the guests, but people were becoming nervous, especially as they retired to their rooms for the evening. The climax of the horror came the next day during the wedding ceremony itself. A guest named Mark was an amateur photographer and had been documenting the wedding. While reviewing the photos he'd taken of the couple exchanging vows, he noticed something terrifying. In one frame, a shadowy figure in a long green dress appeared, leaning over the bride and groom. Her face was unmistakable, pale, skull-like, with hollow eye sockets that seemed to stare straight into his camera. Mark immediately showed the image to the couple, who were visibly shaken. Many of the guests refused to stay another night at the chateau. The wedding weekend, meant to be a celebration of love, ended in chaos and fear. Since that wedding, the stunning Château de Brissac has had trouble hosting similar events, except to those open to the paranormal. So what really happened? Was the wedding party targeted by the ghost of Charlotte de Brissac, the Green Lady, especially after her own marriage ended so tragically? The photo taken by Mark has become an artifact of speculation. Some claim it's definitive proof of the paranormal, while skeptics suggest it's nothing more than a trick of the light or photographic error. Whatever the explanation, the Dupont-Garnier wedding remains one of the most chilling tales tied to this historic site. Do you believe the Green Lady made her presence known to Clara and then to the wedding party? Or could there be a more rational explanation for what happened? Let me know in the comments. What's your take on this haunting? Have you ever had a chilling experience at a historical site? I'd love to hear about it. I have a few more locations to share with you, but we'll go there together next week. Until then, stay curious and stay safe. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more weekly stories. If there are topics you'd like me to cover or stories you'd like to submit for me to read, please leave a comment and send them to my email address in the description. If you'd like to support my work, please give me a like, comment, and definitely share these stories with your friends. It really helps. You can also do some shopping at the Lady Grimm store. There's a link here as a QR code and in the description. Thanks again, and see you next week.